I want to start with two very short stories. First story. A salesman wakes up one morning and finds himself unable to go to work because for some reason he's been transformed into a huge insect. As time goes by, the salesman's getting somehow used to his changed body, whereas to his family he's just a big nuisance, an animal that's incapable to support them financially. In the end, the salesman, the insect that is, dies. And his parents and sister go for a little family vacation. Second story. Two men have been waiting for 50 years on a country road for someone or something called Godot. Each night, a boy delivers the message that Godot won't come today, but will surely arrive tomorrow. But that never happens. Godot doesn't arrive, and the two men wait ever after. These are just two legendary examples of the literary absurd. The first one sums up the plot of a novella by the Prague writer Franz Kafka called Metamorphosis, die Verwandlung. It was written in 1912. The second one is the summary of Waiting for Godot, a theatre play by the Irish writer Samuel Beckett, which was first staged in 1953. What do these two stories have in common? They're not making any sense. They're weird, crazy, ridiculous, absurd. Absurd stems from the Latin word absurdum, literally meaning out of harmony. The absurd, so the dictionary tells us, stands for the irrational, the illogical, the unintelligible. Absurdism is a modern art form that stands for a certain avant-garde tradition. Absurdist narratives are inspired by the observance that reality doesn't behave in a logical way. Many of these works were written shortly before or after World War II. They carry the message that absurdity is a central part of human existence, that human condition is characterized by the nonsensical, the meaningless. The feeling of meaninglessness is, of course, by no means restricted to writers or artists or philosophers. I don't know about you, but most people feel from time to time that life is absurd. Some have that feeling all the time. Not because they walk as huge insects through life, but because they experience life as a rather capricious diva that just doesn't care that much about their ambitions or efforts. What is life? Life is a full-time job. One we all take very seriously. We're making plans. We're determined to struggle very hard to make our dreams come true. And yet, we can't escape skepticism. We can't escape doubt. Sometimes we doubt that our efforts are really worthwhile. We doubt that we'll reach our goals. We know that death can strike any time. Right now, at the moment I've decided to clean up my life and become a better person, I could get diagnosed with cancer. Or any other irrational obstacle could get in my way. Why is that a problem? Must that be a problem? Well, I don't think so. On the contrary, I believe that without the absurd, there's no good life, no happy life even, not for you, not for me. Why do I think so? Isn't it absurd to think so? The absurd is also associated with the contradictory, with the paradoxical. That's because it refers to the conflict between our demands for meaning and the world that all too often doesn't satisfy those demands. For example, Peter. Peter spends all his money for his fiancée. He buys her a house, they move in together, and next day she leaves him for a woman. Or take Kate. Kate desperately tries to get pregnant, whereas her sister Kim doesn't want to have children at all. Kate tries in vitro fertilization and doesn't succeed, whereas Kim all of a sudden finds herself pregnant with triplets. Really? Is that a fact? Or did I just make up another story? As you know, recently, fact and truth have become highly controversial issues. Lately, we've incorporated a new category into the existing domain of reality, the so-called alternative facts. It's possible that those who believe in alternative facts were educated to think that whatever facts there may be, they're all socially constructed anyway. Ever since constructivism has spread from the university to politics, a new facet of the absurd has come to the foreground. And this is the sense that true and false are just two sides of the same coin, that facts are just a matter of perspective. But when for each fact there's an alternative fact, because each can be somehow defended on its own grounds, because there's no common reality by which to measure what's right, what's wrong, what's true and what's fake, then you end up in relativism. Then you have to concede that all facts are relatively true, that what I say is true mustn't feel true for you. For instance, you say that we're living in a post-fact world. I say that we're living among people who prefer following their post-rational sentiments rather than relying on objective scientific criteria. You have your truth and I have mine. And that sounds quite out of harmony, absurd. At least to me, who still believes in science. So, to sum up, in art as well as in daily life, the absurd is associated with a global sense of nonsense. Still, I believe that without the absurd, there's no good, no happy life, not for any of us. I tell you why. I'm a philosopher. I earn my living by giving talks like that and writing books for a large audience. Consider that outside the academy, no one really knows what philosophy is. No one really knows what a philosopher is. As a blonde woman, it can actually be quite dangerous to go to a party and present yourself as a philosopher. People might easily get confused. They might have expected something completely different. They might think that you're not really real or just another alternative fact, or worse. Some time ago, when I went to the gym, there was a new trainer, and by chance she found out about my profession, and she was really shocked. She just stood there, staring at me, and she went, "A philosopher? Oh my God, but I thought the philosophers were all dead." As a philosopher, you happen upon a lot of absurd situations like that. A situation is absurd when it includes a drastic difference between what you're expecting or striving for and what is really the case. You wouldn't expect to be presumed dead. You wouldn't expect to wake up as an insect or stop being the person you thought you were. But what if you did? A small doubt remains. I don't think that doubt is bad. I don't think that bumping into nonsense over and over must necessarily be a bad thing. On the contrary, I believe that every time we feel that a situation is absurd, we are reminded of our freedom to change our attitude towards it. And that's why I don't quite agree to the arguments of the so-called existentialist philosopher of post-war France, especially Jean-Paul Sartre and Albert Camus, to haters of the absurd. For them, life is just inherently meaningless. What happens, happens. Life and the world just doesn't care about us, about whether we're good or bad persons. Therefore, for Sartre, death is just the final absurdity. No more, no less absurd than life itself. Camus, on the other hand, he puts it bluntly. He says that in the face of an absurd world, we've just two options. Either we commit suicide or we become rebels. Camus recommends that we vote for defiance against the world that's just not ready to meet our expectations. He does so because he thinks that absurdity is a problem, a disaster. Oh, wow. Now, let's all take a deep breath and relax a little bit. I got good news for you. The absurd, as such, doesn't exist. Or rather, it exists only for rational animals like us who just can't stop searching for meaning. A hamster's life isn't absurd. A hamster doesn't worry about his rent. A hamster is not free to take a step back and see itself from a distance, but we are. We're free. We're able to transcend ourselves and our situation in thought. And that's a wonderful thing, because if we do, we can see clearly that our world is not the realm of pure logic. Ours is a universe of contingency, and contingent means whatever is such and such could as well be otherwise. In a contingent world, there's no just cause and effect. There's always the possibility of a senseless obstacle getting in our way. And it is this possibility that creates our sense of the absurd. But is what we call irrational, illogical, crazy not always the beginning of a big adventure? Just for a change, imagine a life that would make perfect sense. Everything you've ever wanted would come true. In time, you would find the perfect partner and the perfect job for you. Your kids would be born at precisely the right time. Your boss would be empathetic and full of integrity. You'll never fall ill during vacation. Everything would turn out exactly as planned. Would you call that a good life? Of course not. A good life, eudaimonia, as the Greek philosophers called it, is not determined by necessity. It is determined by action. It requires your active contribution. In a contingent world, if you want a happy life, you shouldn't do everything as planned. You should go out of your way and use your heart and your brain and embrace absurdity, as well as the many doubts that go along with it. And by the way, embracing the absurd doesn't just mean expecting the unexpected. It means expecting everything and nothing at the same time. Your sense of the absurd could well be the most human thing about you. It could well be the proof that you're not an insect. An insect's unable to ponder on alternative facts. But who knows? You never know. You wake up as a bug, maybe even tomorrow morning. So, next time you get stuck in a really absurd situation, don't pity yourself. The absurd reminds you that life is never what you planned it should be. Life is an adventure, and the absurdity is the starting point for a good life. Thank you very much.